Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about a doctor, Dr. Samuel Johnson. We are going to talk about the obstructions we face during our journey of wisdom, as penned down by the great doctor. Samuel Johnson was not the doctor of the body. What actually happened was that he wrote an English dictionary that earned him a doctorate. This dictionary was a landmark achievement in English language. It was published in 1755 in England, but this spirit of achieving wisdom was taking a new turn. While Johnson was working on his dictionary, in France, Diderot began working on the Grand Encyclopédie. The Renaissance and the Enlightenment projects were now finally coming to fruition. Obviously, you might be thinking what is so remarkable in publishing a dictionary. There have been dictionaries all over the world in different languages. We have the first Spanish dictionary in 1495. In 1694, we have the first French dictionary. Did not actually the English take too long to give birth to Johnson and consequently their dictionary? What we are missing in the story is the relationship between the power of language and the power of politics. Language is born and bred in a geographical territory. So the fate of the territory is closely linked to the fate of language spoken on that territory. From 1492, the golden era of Spanish monarchy began after the fall of Granada. In 1495, 3 years later, we have the first Spanish dictionary, which would be much required in the 15th century when Philip II would go on to become a force to reckon with. So, we have the Spanish dictionary in our hands during the era of Hispanic dominance in Europe. Now, let's turn to the first publication of the French dictionary in the 17th century. When Louis XIV ascended to the throne in 1643, he had a well-established L'Académie Française established by the great Cardinal Richelieu in 1635. And with his political power overshadowing other monarchs in Europe, by the end of the 17th century, we get in 1694 the first French dictionary published by L'Académie Française. In both France and Spain, the publication of first dictionaries coincided with the ascendancy of political power. Okay, then let's go to the historical theatre stage during the 18th century and see what passed there in front of human eyes, especially on the British Isles, that can explain the quote unquote delay in the first publication of English dictionary. The British Empire in the 18th century had spread its wing all over the world, from Canada to the East Indies. In the Indian subcontinent, the Mughal Empire was finally coming to an end, and the last nail in the coffin will come in the form of the Battle of Plassey in 1757, fought between the Britisher Robert Clive and the alliance of French and Nawab Siraj-ud-Dawla, proving the military might of the British in this part of the world. Even though Mughal emperors remained in power for around a century more, but they were nothing more than embellishments, a living symbol of historical relic. But it was not only in India that the British were challenging French control. It was also in Quebec. In 1759, finally, the English defeated them in a battle in Quebec, paving the way for full British control in the region. Johnson was not directly connected with any political motive per se, but imagine for yourself. You live in a country whose political power is achieving great heights all over the world. Then the general spirit amongst your countrymen would be work on your tradition, culture, and language, so that the attraction your country is getting from the victories all over the world is actually capitalized to gain literary might. Johnson's dictionary is a statement of literary hegemony. The newly conquered colonies would require dissipation of English language. If there would not have been Johnson, there would equally have been another genius who would have done this task. The point, and this is proven in all three cases, the Spanish, the French, and the English, is that as the territory of a certain community expands, speakers of its language also increase. But that is not it. The most remarkable contribution to this genre by Johnson is the way he wrote the dictionary. Pick for yourself the Spanish or the French or in fact any English dictionary today. You will find it written as a reference book. If you encounter a difficult word, you open it to find the meaning of that word. That was not Johnson's aim in writing his dictionary. He wanted it to be a piece of literature itself. That is to say that he wrote the dictionary such that people read it to encounter new words and learn new words at the same time. They did not have to read a novel to improve their English and just open the dictionary to find the meaning of an unknown word. Furthermore, English would, in the course of following centuries, overtake Latin as scholarly and global language. Therefore, it was indispensable that this language also had a first class dictionary. Johnson was the doctor not of body but of language, of culture, of art, of literature, and most of all, of learning. As we all know, Johnson's publication of dictionaries is just one contribution of his literary labors. He was an essayist, a novelist, a journalist, a travel writer, and also the most important attribute that made everything he touched into gold, a satirist. He was a sage of his time and wrote in immaculate English, which can be considered a bridge between pre and post industrial England. When he would have started reading, he would have at his disposal only those works written before the Industrial Revolution. But during his life, he saw the great invention of the Industrial Revolution, the most significant one right in his backyard, the steam engine in 1765. Given the acute mind of this sage, he would have realized that he had to use his reading knowledge and adapt it to the emerging situation in the 18th century. In order to teach the public, he decided to write in the dailies like the Idler, the Rambler, and the Adventurer. Today, since we have been talking about the spread of knowledge and its obstructions or challenges on a social level, we will now turn to Johnson's essay entitled Obstructions of Learning, published in the Idler in February 1760, in which he addresses the obstructions faced by an individual when learning. So let's turn to this essay to learn for ourselves what to do when we get in our minds and hearts that make us lethargic and let go of this noble pursuit. So, dear doctor, enlighten us that why does it happen that when we decide to take up studies, let's say we decide to learn a language, let's say French, because we have been obsessed with reading Proust in French since we encountered him in English, and not just that, we want to explore Voltaire and other writers in their original language. But the moment we start our French learning journey, within a few weeks or perhaps days, we lose interest and find justifications for why we should not persevere in this stupid endeavor. The doctor clears his throat and begins, quote open. It is common to find young men ardent and diligent in the pursuit of knowledge, but the progress of life very often produces laxity and indifference. And not only those who are at liberty to choose their business and amusements, but those likewise whose professions engage them in literary inquiries, pass the latter part of their time without improvement, and spend the day rather in any other entertainment than that which they might find among their books. Quote close. Oh, so we thought he would only target people like us who are deeply involved in earning our bread. But he is also really critical of the literary persons. The crucial phase is the progress of life. As life moves ahead and we become more and more involved in it, we keep on jumping from one interest to the other. We have all heard about these terms, short term, medium term, and long term. The thing that should concern us the most is long term, if we are concerned with the direction of the ship in the sea, so that we ensure that we are staying on course and aiming at the correct destination. We have to, nonetheless, adjust our compass constantly in the midst of the storms and challenges at the sea. But we adjust our coordinates again and again in short and medium terms to keep the bow of the ship in the required direction. We get this divergence now that you have explained what happens in the progress of life. But doctor also tell us why does this happen. He would recall his 8 years worth of effort in writing the dictionary and perhaps changing his voice a bit. With a pensive, calm tone, say, quote open. This abatement of the vigor of curiosity is sometimes imputed to the insufficiency of learning. Men are supposed to remit their labors because they find their labors to have been vain, and to search no longer after truth and wisdom because they at last despair of finding them. Quote close. Now it seems that he has almost forgotten people like us, strolling in the park on a Sunday morning. Now he is focused on those people whom we call scholars, those who look at the people laughing in the park with their children and friends with scorn and jealousy, while returning to their study to dissect the most important argument of Locke and Hume. Johnson explains that these scholars become demotivated because they do not have their aim for learning, or they have not understood the nature of this tireless journey which starts from the cradle and ends in the grave. Their labor will remain in vain because they consider learning to be a means to an end and not an end in itself. They consider studies to immediately give them a formula for everything, or as Stephen Hawking always searched for the equation, a couple of symbols put together that could explain everything. This is a grave mistake, Shea Johnson. Truth is not like buying a pizza or building a house. Being true is being in the process of learning. Each moment brings with it the realization that we have understood a bit more about the mysteries of this world. There is no destination in truth. Every step is a destination, and every step is equally also a starting point. So we have to keep on track of this wisdom to keep on moving, and the more we move ahead, the truer we become. We do not become closer to truth. The more we tread the path of truth, the more we comprehend, the more we realize, and the more we internalize it. This is how Johnson explains this phenomenon, continuing his discourse on the reason he has just given. Quote open. But this reason is for the most part very falsely aligned. Of learning as of virtue, it may be affirmed that it is at once honored and neglected. Whoever forsakes it will forever look after it with longing, lament the loss which he does not endeavor to repair, and desire the good which he wants resolution to seize and keep. The idler never applauds his own idleness, nor does any man repent of the diligence of his youth. Quote close. He adds another characteristic of those who shun the path of wisdom. Once we are in the process of doing something, we have the tendency to believe that everything but what we are doing is worth doing, only because we have not yet tasted its delight, or it would bring a change in life. Or as the famous quote goes, which summarizes this attitude, the grass is always greener on the other side. And this is one of the primary reasons that make us obsessed with short term goals. Rather than taking the noble pursuit of walking to the site of pilgrimage, which was supposed to be the intended destination, we get distracted by the bazaars and glimmer of clinking gold coins. But once we do decide to leave the pursuit of wisdom, we realize after some time that we traded paradise for mere coins. It is not so much a scholarly problem. Johnson wants to clarify this, which is why he also gives the example of the idler. This is a psychological problem, or in fact, a part of our psychological makeshift, that we cannot persevere in our tasks because of our mind's tendency to prefer short distractions over long span of attention. Then, dear doctor, it means that we cannot do anything about it. If it is something inbuilt in us, then why complain that these people who detract from the pursuit of knowledge are not worth calling humans? In an almost half apologetic tone, he would realize something and put his right elbow on his left palm and fingers on his lips in a pensive mood and exclaim, quote open, so many hindrances may obstruct the acquisition of knowledge that there is little reason for wondering that it is in a few hands. To the greater part of mankind, the duties of life are inconsistent with much study, and the hours which they would spend upon letters must be stolen from their occupation and their families. Many suffer themselves to be lured by more sprightly and luxurious pleasures from the shades of contemplation, where they find seldom more than a calm delight, such as, though greater than all others, its certainty and its duration being reckoned with its power of gratification, is yet easily quitted for some extemporary joy, which the present moment offers, and another perhaps will put out of reach. Quote close. So he does concede that this psychological condition that we have been talking about is not the only individualistic factor to be blamed. He explains that the exigencies of daily life to earn bread, to take care of one's professional and family life are noble causes in themselves. But what he cannot concede is that nobody ever gets any time off from these occupations. And when we do get time, we spend it in more sprightly and luxurious pleasures rather than educating ourselves and enhancing our personal life and our understanding of the world at large. In today's world, we can say that he would have recommended the use of YouTube and other media outlets to, if not read, then at least listen and watch to gain wisdom. Johnson was a regular theatre goer. He loved Shakespeare more than anything else. He is not against pleasure. He is against useless, mindless pleasure. As Johnson explained, our societies are based more on material interests rather than intellectual interests. The way we organize our societies and splash these cheap leisure delights is abominable. And since our psychology is shaped by social conduct, which includes its shaping through material interests, the people organizing our societies are as much responsible as the individual for debasing truth as not worthy of being fought for. Okay, Doc, fine. You have shouted at us enough. Please, do you care to first of all tell us about any excellencies of learning? You have not said anything much about learning yet. You have just dismantled a few psychological and social issues and then criticized those responsible. Moving back a bit in his chair, he straightens his back a bit. And to indicate that now comes the bumper sticker advice, he begins. Quote open. It is the great excellence of learning that it borrows very little from time or place. It is not confined to season or to climate, to cities or to the country, but may be cultivated and enjoyed where no other pleasure can be obtained. But this quality, which constitutes much of its value, is one occasion of neglect. What may be done at all times with equal propriety is deferred from day to day, till the mind is gradually reconciled to the omission and the attention is turned to other objects. Thus, habitual idleness gains too much power to be conquered, and the soul shrinks from the idea of intellectual labor and intenseness of meditation. Quote close. There would be pin drop silence after this if this paragraph is read in a university lecture room. He explains with simple wit that since knowledge is everywhere available, its worth is considered to be close to none. Since we always are close to books, we never read them. We monetize everything and therefore we take cost to have a monetary value. If it does not have a monetary value, we do not consider it to be a cost. Furthermore, if, as Johnson explains, something as dear as knowledge is free to access or any other good, then we always delay its consumption. We would do it tomorrow or day after. If not this week, then next week. If not next week, then perhaps next month. And this cycle of procrastination gets us into the habit of procrastination. We should remind ourselves at every step, just as we gain habit of doing something by doing it, in the same way we also get into the habit of not doing something by not doing it. And ultimately what matters is what we do. Every person, over here it has nothing to do with scholars, every person must shake off this habitual idleness and become serious about gaining wisdom, which is readily available even now in front of us. But doctor, we have a complaint. When we do go to the books after having prepared ourselves for the intenseness of meditation that you want us to do, what do we find there? First of all, we need to choose amongst hundreds of books in the bookstore or library or wherever you went to find the book. And then, when we do find the most intense book, the most interesting book, we can say, we find in it such laborious debates about trivial things at times that they deflate our intenseness themselves rather than increasing it. What to do then? A note from Johnson. He finally agrees and says, quote open, that those who profess to advance learning sometimes obstruct it cannot be denied. The continual multiplication of books not only distracts choice but disappoints inquiry. To him that has moderately stored his mind with images, few writers afford any novelty, or what little they have to add to the common stock of learning is so buried in the mass of general notions that, like silver mingled with the ore of lead, it is too little to pay for the labor of separation. And he that has often been deceived by the promise of a title at last grows weary of examining and is tempted to consider all as equally fallacious. Quote close. Now we have the third candidate of obstruction, who had been described earlier but not targeted, the writer himself. This is an advice for all the writers that if a person has cared to finally pay a part of his income to buy your book, then make sure that it is worth reading. It has to be a different book, a book made out of a different cloth that pushes our mind into new territories. We are busy in our thoughts, and suddenly we see Johnson getting even more red with rage. He is not yet done with his condescending remark about these flashing best selling writers. He stops our reverie and concludes his advice in a fit of rage. Quote open. There are indeed some repetitions always lawful because they never deceive. He that writes the history of past times undertakes only to decorate known facts by new beauties of method or of style, or at most to illustrate them by his own reflections. The author of a system, whether moral or physical, is obliged to nothing beyond care of selection and regularity of disposition. But there are others who claim the name of authors merely to disgrace it, and fill the world with volumes only to bury letters in their own rubbish. The traveler who tells in a pompous folio that he saw the Pantheon at Rome and the Medicean Venus at Florence, the natural historian who, describing the productions of a narrow island, recounts all that it has in common with every other part of the world, the collector of antiquities that accounts everything a curiosity which the ruins of Herculaneum happen to emit, though an instrument already shown in 1,000 repositories, or a cup common to the ancients, the moderns, and all mankind, may be justly censured as the persecutors of students and the thieves of that time which can never be restored. Quote close. He then stands up and walks away, while we sit and wonder that if not for him, we would not have had an English dictionary. And now we understand why. Thank you, everyone.